Hi, and welcome to another segment of Economic Strategies for Trinidad and Tobago in the 21st century. In our last program, we discussed the current policies and how they were taking us into the poverty cycle. Today, we will look at the economic theories behind the current policies that are being implemented and why we should not use these theories in pursuing our development. We will also introduce the economic theory that we believe should govern our economic development and why we should adopt it. The theory governing the current government economic policy is called the comparative advantage theory. This theory states that what nations produce is based on their resource endowments. They should specialize in what they produce best and trade for the rest. There are three significant dangers for us with this theory. First, it implies the permanency of economic activity. Second, it implies that we would only produce raw materials. And third, it omits knowledge and innovation as resources. For example, it implies the permanency of economic activity in that if we in Trinidad and Tobago have traditionally produced raw materials to supply the material needs of the industrial countries, that we should continue to produce these items and leave them to produce the value-added products. If you do not have the ore to create steel or the aluminum, you should not produce it. For example, Japan, because it does not have raw materials to produce cars, airplanes, and nuclear power plants, should not produce it. If Japan operated according to this theory, they would not produce one car. How many of you drive Japanese cars? Isn't it fortunate for Japan that they decided that the comparative advantage theory could not work for them? If we follow this theory, we will continue to produce cane juice, cocoa, coffee, citrus, oil, and other raw materials. However, we should also be able to own and produce methanol and fertilizer, since we have the natural gas, which is the major resource needed to produce these products. If our government claims that we are adopting this theory, as stated in the Minister of Finance's 1994 budget speech, why then is the government selling off our assets where we have comparative advantage? We are the second largest producers of methanol in the world and a world-class producer of fertilizer. Why then did our government sell our resource endowments or comparative advantage? How do we now specialize in what we best produce? Are our representatives so naive that they talk of theories without understanding what they mean? Or is it that our representatives believe that we are too stupid to understand or too lazy to participate in the decision-making process? If Japan, Singapore, and Korea had stayed with their natural resource endowment, which is their people, they would not be building cars, computers, or nuclear power plants, and more recently, sophisticated fighter planes and satellites in Japan. The third implication I indicated was that it omits knowledge and innovation as resources. We are a very creative and innovative people. For example, we did not have a steel mill, nor did we produce oil drums. However, we created the steel instrument, steel band, carnival, and others. These innovations have come from the less educated in our society, and it is time that we, the so-called intellectual class in the society, do his or her part and create enterprises out of these products. We have to take it a step further and use our managerial, technical, and marketing expertise to move these potential enterprises from the infant stage to the prime and mature stages. This is one of the challenges for the intellectual class, to build significant businesses out of this steel instrument by standardizing the instrument, building the technology and the processes to manufacture the instrument with consistent quality and quantity, and marketing them successfully to the rest of the world. Fellow citizens, for these three major reasons, we cannot subscribe to the comparative advantage theory. If we subscribe to this theory, it means that we agree to remain a backward, underdeveloped, poor third world country. Is that the future you want for yourself and your children? To escape the financial chaos that is inevitable in the current environment, we must adopt a managed trade policy and the industrial rationalization theory. This economic theory states that absolute free competition tends to result in crises, and a comprehensive industrial plan with some government controls need to replace excessive competition with cooperation among firms. We must adopt the industrial rationalization theory and managed trade policy, because in a country with limited natural and capital resources, few entrepreneurs, small population, and limited land mass, we cannot afford the comparative advantage theory. Japan and other successful Asian countries and Germany rejected it because it could not work for them. We must reject it for the same reasons. Government, employers, and unions have a role to play, but they must cooperate with each other. The days for confrontational politics and economics are over. We must also reject the components of the comparative advantage theory: free trade, liberalization, and floating monetary regimes. We must reject it because it is a deliberate attempt to keep us in perpetual poverty. The industrial nations have had protected markets since the Industrial Revolution, during which time they developed their industries, their managerial, technical, and administrative personnel. They have used the infant industry argument and the patent laws to protect their markets, and continue to use them today. What they are forcing us to do is tantamount to asking a second standard student to debate with a PhD. We all know who will win that debate. The goal is to keep you as consumers, not producers of value-added products and services. The industrial rationalization theory and managed trade policy has been successfully used by Japan, the Asians, and Germany in their quest to become quality producers. In the case of Japan and Germany, it took them approximately 50 years to rebuild their economies. In the case of the Asian tigers, it took approximately 25 years to build their economies. I assure you, it will take us less time to build ours. It will take less time because the technology to do it is readily available. Information to assist us in implementing is very accessible, and techniques such as reverse engineering, which involves purchasing a product, breaking it into its components, and rebuilding it, are well perfected. All we have to do is decide to become producers of wealth rather than consumers of wealth. To quote our local Calypsonian shadow, poverty is hell. So if poverty is not what you desire for you and your children, I encourage you to join us and let us dedicate our lives to applying our knowledge and creativity to the producing of superior products and services that would earn us foreign exchange and improve our standard of living. Let us create wealth together and enjoy it together. If you want to escape the poverty cycle, you cannot sit back and wait for the next election to register your protest vote. By then, it will be too late. You will have already entered the poverty cycle. You must become more vocal and active concerning the sale of your national assets. Many of our prized jewels have been sold, but we can put our minds and bodies to the task and purchase more. This time around, we will place them on the stock exchange so that you will own them and have certificates showing that you own them. Professionals would run them, not politicians with absolutely no business experiences or expertise. They are not qualified to manage or sell your birthright. Would you ask a plumber to perform a heart operation? Would you ask a doctor to repair your bathroom? Then why do you allow politicians to sell your businesses? We will train the managers, marketers, accountants, and technicians to run them profitably and efficiently. And we will develop laws and policies that will make it impossible for any future government to sell off our assets without first coming to you, the people who employ them, for your input into the decision. Now is the time to create a new political and economic order. In the 50s, you called for political power. In the 70s, you called for African and Indian power. In the 90s and into the next century, the call must be for economic power. Economic power must be ours. We shall not settle for the crumbs from the foreigner's table, especially when it is our bread. The promise of cheap consumer goods and better days in the future are empty promises. If you do not earn the cash to purchase these goods, no one will be selling them to you. To purchase these goods, you need good-paying jobs. To create good-paying jobs, you must invest in education, technology, research and development. Low-paying jobs created by Kentucky Fried Chicken, Pizza Hut, Burger Boy, and free trade zones cannot sustain our economy or our mental development. It is time for us to achieve economic power. But to achieve economic power requires that we educate ourselves and our fellow man and use this knowledge to create wealth. Indians and Africans must unite with the understanding that our destiny is intertwined. Do not allow others to create hatred between us, because as you travel the world, you will realize that Africa and India, the black-skinned continents, are the poorest, least developed, and most exploited. It is also time for us to evaluate the watchwords of the nation: discipline, production, and tolerance. Yes, we need discipline, and yes, we need production, but it is time for you to redefine tolerance, because you have been tolerating incompetence, inefficiency, and ineffectiveness for too long. We must not tolerate incompetence from our public servants. We must not tolerate incompetence from our teachers. We must not tolerate incompetence from our politicians. We must not tolerate incompetence in our workplace. We must replace tolerance with excellence. We must replace tolerance with excellence. We must produce excellent teachers. We must produce excellent students. We must produce excellent politicians. We must produce excellent plumbers. Excellence in all of our endeavors must be the new watchword. Excellence is the only thing we must tolerate. When Dr. Williams gave us these watchwords, he used tolerance to emphasize the need for us to tolerate different races, religions, etc. But over the years, the meaning has degenerated into tolerating nonsense, inefficiency, and ineffectiveness. Our new watchwords must be discipline, production, and excellence. And our motto must be wealth without poverty and opportunity for all to develop to their full potential. We must understand that foreign trade is a war in which nations seek to extract wealth from each other. If we cannot develop technologically superior products and services, other nations will extract our wealth from us. Many of our leaders believe that we are too small to compete. However, we must compete because that is the law of economics and of survival. It is our choice to settle for the crumbs from the foreign master's table, or bake our own bread and try to compete on the basis of excellence. The Asians have done it, and so can we. We only have to decide to do it. When we sell off our assets, instead of making them more efficient or productive, our politicians do not recognize that they have given up not only a capital asset, but a knowledge asset. How could we become excellent managers and administrators when foreigners retain these key positions for themselves? I am reminded of the first day of my MBA program, when the professor called the class a bunch of cows. He explained that cows did not know where the farmer took the milk, how much it was sold for, or why it was sold. He went on to explain that the role of every student in the class was to gain that managerial knowledge to keep America strong and to keep a standard of living high. He closed by saying that it is the key knowledge that must not be shared when they went on overseas assignments. Our current leaders have sold our knowledge and asset base, but I know we can rebuild it. All you have to do is agree that you want to do it. Everything is relative. We have a population of 1.2 million people. We have one of the largest economies in the Caribbean. We are strategically located for exporting to the North, South, and Central America. Our focus must be to create products for developing countries and countries less developed than ourselves. Temporarily, we will remain on the dole for the crumbs from oil, gas, fertilizer, and steel. But we will use the crumbs to help us create wealth through sustainable economic development by targeting industries with export potential and implementing a policy of managed trade. A study published by Princeton University describes the percent of workers using computers by job and by education. The chart should give you an idea of how important education will be in the future. Persons with elementary school education, only 9% find employment in the computer industry. Remember, most of our population are in this category. Computers have revolutionized the world and introduced the information age. Can we compete if we do not educate ourselves and our children? Persons with high school education, approximately 28% find jobs in the computer industry. Persons with some college, that is, persons graduating from a community college that offers associate degrees, 45% of them find work in this industry. Persons with college or university education, bachelor's degree and above, 59% find work in the industry. And persons with master's degree or PhDs, 60% find jobs in this industry. Based on these statistics, our strategy must be to educate all of our citizens to the high school level. But we must now introduce a community college level. that would fill the void that exists today. We must offer associate degree programs, and we must focus on the computer or information industry. We were slaves during the Industrial Revolution and did not have the landmass or large population to enjoy the economies of scale for development of mass production. In today's environment, knowledge is the key asset. We must develop it. Our major enterprise must be education. If you examine your environment, you will note that the highest paid are usually the most educated. This has been the case in the past and will even be more so in the future. Companies are doing more with less, and classic white-collar administrative and clerical workers are being replaced by high-tech machines. For example, the computer companies have designed systems that you can dictate to. As you dictate your message, it types it and stores it for you. In other words, there are systems now that can replace secretaries. Price is the major reason why they have not been introduced into the marketplace. In other developments, computer manufacturers have developed computers that actually diagnose themselves for failure problems. A touch of a button tells the maintenance engineer where and what the problem is and what to do to fix it. This means that a highly paid technician can now be replaced with a lower skilled person. I am sure you have been into Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants and noticed the cash registers. One does not have to be able to read or count to use these registers. You simply look at a picture of an item on the menu, press a button, and enter how much money the customer gave you. It tells you the change you have to return. Anyone can understand pictures and can operate these machines. Do you believe that we could build or sustain our national economy with these low-paying jobs? No-skill jobs? The answer is no. We must become involved in building portions of the high-tech hardware and software. The only way to do it is to educate ourselves. Education must be our largest enterprise. And any teacher who does not seek to further educate himself or herself on a continuous basis will have to leave the school system. Any teacher who does not spend the time educating the students will have to find employment elsewhere. Teachers will be respected and must be well paid. However, they must earn our respect and they must earn their salary. Our children and the future of our nation must become top priority. Once our nation is wealthy and prosperous, all of our citizens will be wealthy and prosperous. Remember the oil boom years? The nation was prosperous, and so were we. Yes, we blew it. We made mistakes, but we must learn from our mistakes. The key is not to make the same mistake twice. And we must not view the setback as a permanent failure. The truth is, you only learn when you fail. Most times, when you do things right, you do not even realize that you are doing it right. You do not know what you did. It is when you fail that you can learn. Let us sit back and reflect and admit that we blew it. Let us ask ourselves the following questions. What did we do wrong? And how did I mess up? Once we identify these, we can go on. Only then we will be winners. Our current government's policy indicates that we did not ask ourselves these critical questions. We expect foreigners to do everything for us. We have decided to become dependent children rather than independent men and women. By choking job generation through liberalization and downsizing, our government has undermined the most important social program there is. Jobs. Jobs provide what no government can: self-respect, dignity, economic self-sufficiency, and the wherewithal to build a life. To be able to develop and make producer goods is the heart of economic life. And to be able to make knives, forks, nails, and various cutting edges is basic to developing and making producer as well as consumer goods. Can we even make these basic products? After all of these years, don't you think you should be able to make them? Any economy that is not producing for itself increasing wide ranges of producer goods is not making strides towards development. No matter what it is buying. Being able to buy the latest gizmos is not development. You must be able to produce something. Insofar as any development is involved in what our merchants are buying, that development is taking place elsewhere, not in Trinidad and Tobago. Nothing. Nothing in buying and selling builds our capacity to develop versatile and productive economies. Our purchases only reinforce our dependence on oil. And since we no longer own it, we have to seek other ways to generate wealth and improve our standard of living. We must dream bold dreams. It gives you a sense of greatness. A dreamer does not fear failure and is committed to excellence. Without the dreamer, nothing happens. Dream bold dreams and challenge yourself to achieve what you thought was unachievable. Educate. Educate yourself every day, and your dreams will become bolder and you will achieve more. A look at the real economic world reveals that most nations are composed of a collection of very different economies, rich areas and poor areas within the same nation. A quote from Nashiro Amaya of Japan concerning Japan's economic success, and I quote, "We violated all the traditional economic concepts. The realization of the myth that if you entrust things to the market mechanism, that the invisible God hands will bring about a rational result is quite limited. Remember that in the past century, only one nation, Japan, entered the Rich Nations Club. They did not do it by pursuing policies that were antithetical to their aspirations. If we wish to enter the Rich Nations Club, we must implement policies that support our aspirations. Before we close, let me leave you with this thought. We must remember that in the conditions of modern life, the rule is absolute. The race or nation which does not value trained intelligence is doomed. We are too creative a people to be doomed to poverty and despair. Get up and act now. Join Citizens Organization for Rebuilding the Economy and help to build the prosperous nation you envision. Remember, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. My name is Carlton Joseph, and on behalf of Citizens Organization for Rebuilding the Economy, thanks for taking the time to listen.